Okay. Right, well, thanks everybody for coming. I don't know why I'm in this position, but I think I am in this position because I have been involved in the first phase of Terminus Road's regeneration 20 years ago. So just to recap what's happening is the model here shows from Banker's Corner up to Bolton Road. And this is the bit we worked on 20 years ago with the Borough Council. We were appointed by the Borough, working with Tim Cookson, who was their Chief Planning Officer, and their Conservation Officer, who was Jeff Collard. And it started off with a commission that we had from the Borough Council to produce an Eastbourne Town Centre streetscape design manual. Colin, I think you were probably...
No, I wasn't there for that.
Wasn't you?
No.
Right, okay. So this design manual was because East Sussex, even then, look after our streets, it was done in conjunction with East Sussex County Council to try and get some sort of uniformity, if you like, or at least a design manual, so that everybody would know what to do. It wasn't totally prescriptive, but it was quite involved. So basically, we looked at the way Eastbourne had evolved, and historically, of course, it goes into how Eastbourne was developed by the 7th Duke of Devonshire, and he paid for the roads and the streets and the boundary walls, which is unbelievable, really, in his part of the town. This actually isn't part of his estate, but never mind. So, but right up to Meads, that was his estate. And so we looked at the historical town plan that was produced by him and the Davis Gilberts, which was part of this estate. We looked at the local detailing, which are quite unique to Eastbourne, like railings, brick pavements, and the need to plant trees. And the particular thing about Eastbourne by the end of the Victorian period was that it was called a leafy Eastbourne because it had so many trees. Trees were planted as part of the town planning. And as it says here, various town planners recently, including the late Christopher Hussey, have described Eastbourne as a model of town planning which should be recognised by planners as a masterpiece of its genre. So quite a lot of town planners do know about Eastbourne, not particularly because it's amazing buildings. We have some fine buildings, but we haven't got sort of outstanding buildings like London or perhaps even Brighton's got a couple, like the Royal Pavilion. So our only Grade 1 listed building, in fact, is Compton Place, which hardly anybody sees. But, so Eastbourne shines not by its fantastic buildings, though we've got a lot, but by this plan. So the idea was that we would get involved and produce a manual which would respect that plan, and it was signed off by the council with a few opposition people. There was one particular councillor who objected to the view on the back, which is a view of Victorian Terminus Road with lots of trees. But if you look, there's a chap doffing his hat to a lady, and that was thought actually to be unacceptable now. Nobody doffs their hat to a lady. So we had about a 10-minute debate on should men doff their hats to ladies. But you know what the councils are like. It's quite interesting. I'd doff and you'd doff your hat to me, wouldn't you? Thank you. And it was quite funny. But the idea was we'd start off with reintroducing brick pavements to Eastbourne, which were very much an Eastbourne vernacular tradition, and promote tree planting and appropriate street furniture. So it was sort of respecting our Victorian heritage. And so this scheme here was unashamedly to put back between Banker's Corner and Bolton Road a pedestrian stretch which really did look quite tired. Now I've done each of your little brochure here, because what has happened is the council now are being led totally by East Sussex in the regeneration of Terminus Road. And East Sussex, I'm sure they're wonderful, but they haven't quite respected the town centre design manual, which really now is sitting on a shelf. I mean, it's not looked at now at all. So, which is, I think, a pity, but I'm not promoting what we did. No, it's not looked at now. So they've gone their own way, and the result has been phase one of Terminus Road redevelopment, which you've all seen between the railway station and Bankers Corner. Now, I've got to be careful here. You may love it. I think it certainly looks modern, but it looks like any other precinct in any other town, mostly minor towns, because Westminster wouldn't have done that, for example. So it looks like any other sort of standard town. You can look at them all around the country. It's sort of standardisation. There are a few trees. There are a few sort of scrubby planters, which with funny shapes that you trip over if you're partially sighted. I could be rude about it, because when they came up with phase two, if you read the literature, they say we have learned from, they don't call them mistakes, we have learned from a few issues that arose from phase one. For example, I witnessed somebody crossing the road in front of the station, and there's a little island in the middle. The paving there is the same colour as the paving that you're walking across. So if you're partially sighted, you don't realise there's a trip hazard. I mean, I've seen somebody fall over that. So it's just not particularly brilliant. But what they want to do is to do the same thing for Bankers Corner up to Bolton Road, and from Bolton Road right down to the end. We've had several meetings and we're just not being listened to. So this little talk today is really to say, could we get some sort of liaison going with East Sussex about what is going to happen? Now my old firm, John D. Clark, has been slightly involved in trying to get the bid together, and we've got the bid for the end of Victoria Place, as it's now called. And to give society a bit of credit, there was a big debate about whether the top end of Terminus Road should be renamed to Victoria Place, which was the original name for that stretch. I think it's lovely because, but what you've got to remember is, why was it changed? Now, the reason it was changed was because in the 30s, 40s and 50s, anything Victorian, unless you were John Betjeman, was pretty much despised. Everybody thought it was terrible. My parents thought Victoriana was ghastly. And so there was this tremendous reaction against it. Yeah. And I think that Terminus Road, the traders at the top end of Terminus Road, who were in Victoria Place, decided it would be better to rename their road part of Terminus Road, which then, of course, was a big shopping precinct with all the big stores, and it was pretty high class, and they wanted to be part of Terminus Road. Now, the traders now, well, they're not particularly worried about being part of Terminus Road anymore, because most of it's sort of vacant stores. So they agreed to rename it. I don't think the postcode is still. We did for them an arch, because to get to the detail, in this drawing here, you'll see that we did a couple of planters, because we called this stretch, we renamed it to the name of this gardens, which is Sussex Gardens. You'll see the signs are still on the wall saying Sussex Gardens. So we renamed this, not for the post office, but locally, Sussex Gardens, to give it the sense of gardens. And we planted trees, so a lot of these have died. We produced this portal entrance, which was based on original armwork and two planters, just to give it a feel that you're entering a garden. Otherwise, it's just you're entering a road. Now, East Sussex have removed these, and I was a bit upset about it. Various people wrote in and said, "Why are you removing them?" They said, "Well, it sort of looks old-fashioned, and we just want." So the portals were removed, the railings were removed, but Christina Eubank has arranged for all the bits of the railings, which are specially cast, to be put in store. So they're in store in Hailsham. And our chief executive did promise that he'd try and reinstate these a bit further down. The reason they were also removed is because they wanted to have big wheels and fun fairs and sort of activities, and they got in the way, which we accepted. But they haven't been replaced, and at the moment there's a bit of an issue because they're certainly not going back here. So the proposal with the council was to perhaps reuse them at the top end of Terminus Road. If you look at the first picture on your sheet, that could be an arch saying Victoria Place, which I did for Christina as part of the preliminaries for the bid. It's just a bit of fun, really. It's an arch like you'd see in Carnaby Street, Victoria Place, and at the top is the Queen smiling, because, of course, we're not amused, but she was. She's very amused by this lovely precinct. So the idea was to get the smiling Queen at the top and then reinstate the planters. If you look at the second page, that's a photographic collage of the original planters that were here, reinstated at the top end of Terminus Road. I wouldn't go, I think that would make a very nice portal entrance to Victoria Place, but it could go the other end. The next sheet just shows the details of the railings that were done for the planters at that time. The next sheet, which is this one with a lot of banners, okay, that's looking down towards the sea in Victoria Place, with an idea perhaps it could have some sort of banners. That was done by my old firm, John D. Clark, and as part of the bid, which was successful, which is great. So the fact of the matter is, we're in a situation in Victoria Place where we've got the bid money, which is fantastic, and everybody should be congratulated for all the work they've done in achieving the funding. But of course, funding is one thing, what you do with the money is another. And so I'm rather keen that we don't have more of phase one, which was from the station to Banker's Corner, which arguably is okay there because you've got the Beacon Centre with modern buildings, and it shows that Eastbourne can do what everybody else does. It's great. I mean, we've made the point. Here it is. Concrete slab paving, granite roadway, which I quite like, speckly. Not enough trees, funny planters that really don't seem to work, and these things called breaker strips, which run across all the way along, which really do look pretty old-fashioned now. I don't know what you think, Joe, but I mean breaker strips. Breaker strips are going all the way right up to the front. They're different coloured slices, sort of at funny angles, and they're supposed to represent. Guess what the breaker strip represents? No, sort of in the mind as a design feature. They represent the breakwaters of Eastbourne. Now, I mean, that's in their manual. And you just think, what a funny thing to do. I've spoken to several people saying, what does this represent to you? It certainly doesn't represent breakwaters. It just looks like bits across the road that you wonder whether you're going to trip over, especially if you half close your eyes. When we did this, I actually put on a blindfold with the old scheme and tried to negotiate my way down the 60s shopping precinct. And it was really hard because you come across bollards that aren't in line, trees that aren't in line. It was real 1960s. And it was very hard to negotiate my way down. So the idea of this is going back to what some people might think rather boring orderliness of the Victorian period. But actually what we were trying to recreate was the tree-lined boulevard that you might see in some of these early prints. And if you come up here and look down there, and perhaps Chris can angle his camera, this works quite well this end, where the chap has his stall. These 6 trees actually give you a feeling of what it could be like. And what I haven't said, which was really annoying, is that we couldn't get enough money to redo the paving. So the paving that's there is the old 1960s concrete block paving, which looks awful. But of course it brought the whole thing down. So we've got some quite nice lampposts, which were cast from the barley sugar lampposts in Devonshire Park, specially cast. We've got trees, but a lot of them haven't been replaced when they've died. We've got this rather funny central feature with the the monument that was put in by the Youth Council. We came up with the idea of a sugar loaf, which is still there, but I think that's due to come out, which is rather a shame for the children who've got their hands planted. I'd really like to see that retained. It's a sundial, but it doesn't brilliantly work as a sundial. But there's been an idea it could actually form the base of a run-life sculpture, a seagull or something like that on the top. So I don't know really whether that needs to go. I've had discussions with East Sussex about the lampposts, and they certainly don't want those. They want modern poles. So those are coming out, which means we can reuse a few more in various heritage locations. So that's what happened. Now the other thing was that Chris wants me to mention is that in this scheme we had a triumphal staircase going up to the roof over the Sussex Gardens to form a nice sort of planted area and sitting area that you can actually get up to. You'd have to provide disabled access now. There would need to be a lift, of course, I'm sure. Quite right. But the idea was to use these spaces because this area that was built out in the late 19th century to form the shops was originally, these were all flats and housing, and these were gardens with railings round. And we also did a scheme for Hyde Gardens, by the way, which I've got the drawings, to reinstate Hyde Gardens into a proper town square instead of the car park it is now. There are issues there because it's a nice income for the Borough Council because unlike most of the other parking spaces around town, the Hyde Gardens is on council land, so we actually get the money. But nevertheless, to turn a town square, like a London square, into a car park was really not very sensitive. So it would be lovely to see Hyde Gardens back to a square with a cafe at one end, and markets could take place in it and so on. So there's all sorts of exciting things to do. The other thing I thought I'd just show you, the other scheme we did was for South Street, which was to pave that in brick paving. Well, that's been done, so if you want to see modern brick paving, just walk up South Street. You might not think about it, but those are modern Bagridge bricks, whereas a lot of our brick pavements have not been touched since they were laid in 1870, and they've got a bad name because people trip on them, and you know, we're not after trippy pavements, we're after beautiful pavements. And you can echo what the Victorians did with their brick pavements and restore the original pavements, which I think is the way forward. So Grove Road has been done, but I've heard that, through the grapevine, that East Sussex want to do more of what they've done in Phase 1, not only in Terminus Road, but in South Street, which is why I raised this, because they want to do that. And this is South Street, and the idea was to create a piazza in front of the town hall with a fountain.
It's Grove Road.
So, sorry, this is Grove Road. Yeah, you're quite. Have I been saying South Street for half an hour? Sorry, Grove Road. So there's South Street, there's Grove Road, and it's quite narrow, so we introduced a few trees, but not many. We couldn't really make a tree-lined boulevard there. But it's got brick paving, build-outs, Morris lampposts, which are really interesting square-based lampposts. We've got about 20 left in the town now. And they're interesting because the big square base used to house an individual gas meter. They're unique in the country because most lampposts are quite thin all the way down because they had a central gas meter. For some reason, the gas company at Eastbourne didn't want that. So we've got these amazing local lampposts, which I love. So we had about 4 of those, and they needn't actually create light as far as finding a way around. They can be features with some solar lamps in, so you get a glow at night. During the daytime, they look as if they're the lighting, but actually your lighting is formed by lights up high on the building. So we're not going back to sort of gas-lit, finding your way around with a stick. I mean, you know, this, we're not that mad, but you can actually create a really special environment, which is modern and vibrant, but echoes the past in certain respects, and you get the best of both. And at the moment, my fear is, which is why I'm giving this little talk, that the way it's going with East Sussex, they just seem hell-bent on not doing any of this, but to create more of this. So I've said my bit. You may think, actually, I'm an old past it, 70 years old, and crazy, and it'd be better to have a bright, new, spanking, modern town like this and get rid of all this stuff. In which case, I'm going to move.
I'm right in thinking that you really basically want this to respond to the architecture that's adjacent to it.
Yeah.
So it's a different section completely.
Exactly. Because you could then come from this, which is Eastbourne saying, we can do this,
Yeah.
but with our modern beacon, and the buildings on the other side aren't that special.
Yes.
By the time you get to here, you've got this lovely terrace. This, not quite so nice terrace, but this is the one with the urns on, you know, Sussex Gardens urns. Barclays Bank isn't bad. Rebuild after the bombing. You've got this, which I've built, so I don't know if you know. This is Superdrug, which used to be a piano shop, and it's got this wonderful round window in cast iron. That's where Debussy, when he stayed at the Grand Hotel, bought a piano in this music shop, and the piano still exists in a museum in the south of France, and it's got the name on the piano. So that I've always thought could be a fantastic cafe called Debussy's. You know, there'd be the piano tinkling away. I mean, so there's so much to play for. We've also got these issues, Debenhams, which had a wonderful arcade called Bobby's Arcade and Bobby's Restaurant. It's never going to be a superstore again, but to have some specialist shops in an arcade, maybe call it the Burlington Arcade, with our links to Lord Burlington and the Duke of Devonshire. So that could be a Burlington Arcade for Eastbourne, sort of echoing the Burlington Arcade in London. My thoughts on that. Upstairs conversion, and round the back in Lismore Road, it's quite nice terrace until you get round the corner. There could be a brand new modern block there, and it could even be a higher block, you know, modern high block to pay for it. So there are various ways that you can incorporate modernism, but perhaps keep the facade of Bobby's. And then, of course, TJ Hughes, which we're having a huge campaign about. Well, it's not really us. What is it now? 4,500 people have signed a petition to save the front of TJ Hughes. Hopefully with its dome cafe, that's a little bit. Maybe you don't need 2 dome cafes, but I think it would be nice to keep the dome in TJ Hughes. But on the other hand, the Bobby's dome, the room underneath it has amazing plaster panels around with sort of shepherds and nymphs dancing about in plaster. I mean, it's actually a much better room. So for my, you know, if we're compromising, I would say keep the front of TJ Hughes. Don't really mind what happens. You could raise it, make it economical. Keep the Bobby's front again, facadism, or just convert it. Put back the arcade and have the restaurant. And then when you get up to Victoria Place, I'd love that to really shine as a sort of that. And we've got a wonderful butcher there now. I mean, it's happening. But and we've got the money. When we did this, all the ideas were there, but there was no money. So that's why we couldn't do the paving, which is why it looks so awful. I've never been proud of it, because the only good bits are above eye level. I like the lampposts, I like the trees, but there's not much else, because if you look down, it's this awful paving. So we never got off to a good start because there was no money. But we've got the money, and apparently there's money for this phase too, and this. So in a way, what I'm saying is I think we're at the threshold now of we can pay for it, but if we're not careful, I fear East Sussex may just carry on with that, and in 10 years' time, everybody will say, oh, that looks jolly tired, let's do something again. And what a waste of money. And I'll never live to see a beautiful boulevard running down to the sea.